Hello and welcome back to the dive presented by Honda Season 5, Episode 6. Before we jump into it today, we do have a couple of reminders and announcements. First off, going forward, we are going to be live on all platforms at 5 a.m. Tuesday mornings. So wake up before we do and get
way
right on
before
that.
we do.
Way before.
Hours, many hours.
Also, continue to send us in your questions. Hashtag the dive lol on Twitter. We haven't been reminding people for those, so it started to dwindle a bit. We'll get the message back out there. Also, the voice messages on Anchor are still open if you want to send in the voice comms as well. Those are always fun.
Mm-hmm. To kick it off, how did fantasy go for you this week, Kobe?
I lost. I live and die by FlyQuest, so I already know. I don't have to check my points or anything as the day is going on. I'm just like, did FlyQuest lose? Well, I've lost as well. Thank you very much. I did ban away. I banned away a bunch of points from Emily, though. I was playing Emily. I got a really good Graves ban versus Sven Skaren, and chopped off a bunch of points, but it didn't matter. She made so many more points than me.
See, but that's the important thing, is that you can be like, as the coach of your team, you did a great job at pick ban, and it's just your players let you down.
Goddamn FlyQuest, man.
I think we should make an award for most points gained or removed from other people and award it at the end of the split. That way you can get something, because you're.
I think
probably
Kobe's
not
definitely doing the best so far.
Yeah.
It's looking like Tigris is going to take the easy dub though on the season.
Yeah.
We'll see if things change, but she has destroyed everyone 2 weeks in a row now. The Fudge pick is looking pretty value. You know, after lock-in, I was looking for like a pretty suspect pickup, but Fudge has been getting a lot of points. Things go well for her. I played against Mark this week and beat
No, we don't need to talk about that. I think we already
like
fulfilled
3 points.
the fantasy segment.
Absolutely obliterated, you know. Not even close. I got 3 bans against him, but the bans reduced so few points because the players got no points when I got the thing. I got 2 someday Renekton games taken off, and then I think a Rel game for a smoothie that reduced him by like 3 points or something like that.
Hell yeah.
Good
Good job, coach.
It was a nail biter. It actually came down to the last game where I had 2 CLG members in, and you had a Blaze Olive. It was the last game of the weekend too.
Yeah.
And
Blaze Olive got me 4 points in that one. Came up.
That's
clutch.
what he needed. He got you all 4 of the points you needed, dude. I was watching that game. Like, you know, Turtle gets like a triple kill. I'm like, oh my god, did I just? Because I was like down 50 points going into that game. I didn't care what was happening, who was going to win.
Yeah.
Like building the segment. I'm like, whatever, put whatever plays in there. I'm watching my fantasy team right now.
Yeah.
And
you know what's really funny too that I realized is that when I checked back at the end of the day and I was like, oh hey, I won. And then I remembered the first game of the week, TL with Tactical. He got a triple kill from like fountain diving. Like they didn't end the game. They waited for them to respawn and got 3 more kills before the game ended. So thank you, TL. Even if you didn't give me that many points the rest of the week, that first game came up big. But
Yeah,
Dardoch was racking it in for you. Dardoch got you 100 points.
Dardoch's a beast. Dignitas are beasts. I don't know. I feel like the more that I'm looking at our total like combined points through week 1 and week 2 right now, and I'm technically 3rd. And I just don't believe I'm going to stay there. Like you're saying, Tigris is above Crumbs, who's 2nd place, by 200 points.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like 40 between me and Crumbs, and it's like, you know, 20 between me and the next person. It gets really, really compressed from there. But I don't know how well my roster will do going forward, considering I have 2 CLG members and 1 Dig member. So I'm not feeling
doing well though.
Yeah, if they can keep it up, I'll be okay. But it's like, you know, there's that, is the other foot going to drop feeling right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we should get right into that right now, because that is also
get into the other foot.
Yeah.
Let's start stepping here.
Exactly.
Bring that other foot, brother.
Or put that other foot in a shoe, and then you can walk outside
These
with
boots
it.
are made for walking.
More
honestly,
metaphors.
though,
Let's do it.
I like the look into the future, because there's no way that Dardoch gives up on this, A to Z champion challenge for the jungle.
I love
He's
this.
definitely going to push it for at least a few more jungle picks. I want to see how this kind of affects Mark as he has him on his fantasy team, and you keep on going down, and eventually he's dipping down into like Alawi jungle and all this random ass stuff. But right now it's working great, and the Kayn was Sick. I loved it. That was one of the most fun games we've had in so long. He did not, shy away from it. We were competitively viable. Red Kayn. He really just embraced the game that they were in. 4.5 range champions because only melee was Gnar, and he's ranged most of the time as well. Went blue. They also had good synergy in their draft with the Kayn. Zoe Bubble is setting him up. Tom Kench to be able to devour him, so he can go in and assassinate people. And Dignitas 3-0 last weekend, sitting at 4-2.
The whole enemy team was all squishy. They played double marksman. They had like a squishy jungle. Like the only person you wouldn't want to assassinate as Blue Kayn was maybe the Gnar, but it's like everyone else was
you
open
see that
season.
mini Gnar? That's another little squishy.
Yeah. so it was actually a really good game for it. I really enjoyed watching it. I kind of tweeted about it last week, and then I tweeted about it going into this week, but I was like, well, this is funny and everything, but I don't really think he's going to keep going. I was like, wow, I can't believe he's doing the A to Z jungle challenge on stage. And,
he's going to keep going.
He seems like he's going to keep going. I think if he did this week, he'll keep going next week. Because I was actually looking at some of the champions that he hasn't picked still. And there's quite a few that are fairly viable, right? Like he still hasn't played like a Gragas. He hasn't played an Elise. He hasn't played an Ivern. Like there's a lot of junglers that are out there that are like, just as viable as Mundo and stuff that he already picked, that he could go towards. So I hope he keeps it going.
Yeah, I hope he keeps it going too. I think that Ivern is not long for this world. He's with the next patches coming up as well. Ivern got nerfed. Moonstone is getting nerfed again. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of things that are going to pile on. But honestly, I'm really happy with Dig's play as well. It wasn't just Dardoch. I thought Soligo had a really good game, and this squad is one of those squads that has a good story behind it, kind of like a Bad News Bears story. A lot of them have had to bounce around a bunch of teams, and now they're finding success together, sticking it to the man, sticking it to those upper.
Those people on the dive who put them 8th or 9th, whatever they did, those idiots. Yeah. The thing about it too is like. Asta Neo is looking great alongside Afro as well. This is like the second young player who, alongside Afro, just kind of like feels like they follow up on his plays super well. They get fed, and then they are able to team fight pretty well because they feel like they're ahead in the game state often. I mean, even going back to Cody's-son on Old 100 Thieves, that was kind of the case too, where it felt like a lot of the early kills in the game came from Afro playmaking, and it's like, hey, I'm a 2-0 Kaisa, like of course I'll press R and go in there, at like 10 minutes into the game. So I don't know. I think all the members are looking pretty good.
Yeah, he's the rookie whisperer. He just needs some players with good hands who aren't going to consider if they should go in or not when he says. Just follow up on his plays, get in there. It's working well. It's been a couple times now, as you say. I feel like their bot lane is actually their most solid part. I think the solo lanes had a better week this week. The big question for me on if Dignitas is a contender or a pretender, though, is going to be the upcoming schedule, because it's going to get a lot harder for them. They did have a 3-0 weekend, but it was against a much easier grouping of teams. They have C9 and TSM and FlyQuest all next week. That could easily be an 0-3 week. If they have another good performance, then you have to start really sitting up and taking notice of this team and thinking about where they realistically could get to.
Well, we got to slap the labels on them all right now. Make it hard mode. Are they contenders or pretenders, Azael?
First up, contender for what? Contender for the championship, or contender for playoffs? Give me a definition here, and I'll give you an answer, Kobe.
I didn't come up with the game. Okay.
All right. If we say contender for championship, it's pretender, too clear cut, I think. Yeah. That's why I don't like it. So let's say
top 4, top half. What are we doing? I go top 4.
Okay. Wait, you're saying?
I think it could be a contender for top 4. I think it's possible. I mean, I think that they've had a really good start. I think it's still unlikely. Like odds are, they're probably going to end lower than that. But I mean, they've certainly exceeded my expectations already. They've been a really fun team to watch, and because they still have a lot of young players who I think have a lot of room to grow. When you're looking at Neo and and Saligo, as well as Fake God. Like, yes, Fake God and Saligo have been in the LCS a bit, but these guys are still very young in their LCS career, and if they are continuing to improve, I think that this team could, develop into a team that could be challenging those squads at the top.
Well, currently they are top 4. That's why
Yep.
I kind of drew the line there, because them plus TSM are sitting at the 4-2, and below them, it kind of the point of the question is not just Team Liquid, but Team Liquid and EG. So if we're drawing the line at top 4 and talking about contenders or pretenders, do you think TSM sitting up there too, tied with Dignitas? If you're giving Dignitas the contender, are TSM also there after their 3-0 weekend, and Team Liquid and EG are on the out?
I mean, I'm going to go back to Dig for a second. I think Dig is a pretender. I mean, I didn't really get to answer that.
Yeah.
I think that's why I was going to say top 6 if you wanted to give me that, but there's no way they're going to stay top 4 through the end of the split in my mind. Like, they'll even out. I'm not saying it's going to be EG specifically. Team Liquid's going to climb above them, and at that point you have 100 Thieves, C9, TSM, and TL. Like, you don't even need EG to get above them. So I just think it's too hard to really happen to stay up there for that long. But if you gave me top 6, I would have taken it, which is still way better than I think what all of us were predicting. So like, this sounds negative, but it's still a positive take for me that, like, even at a pretender at top 4, I think they're actually still way better than we thought.
Yeah, definitely agree on that one.
All right, upside is good for them, right? And it's been exciting to watch, especially because they're doing it with this kind of Dardoch jungle pool.
Yeah, they're doing it with style. That's the key. They're gaining fans along the way. For TSM, people definitely perceive them to have a much higher ceiling, and it was the surprise that they were so far down in the standings at the beginning, and some of the games that they were winning, maybe not just the standings, but some of the games they were winning, also did not look that clean. So I think this was a really important weekend for them because they also ended it on the highest note with the best game last for their 3-0. And specifically, I really liked how Power of Evil was playing a lot for the team. He used so many teleports for team members. It wasn't just the big Azir shuffle in the Team Liquid game to get them the biggest upset of their weekend. But all throughout the weekend, he was using them to side lanes to go cover for people. There's a specific moment where in their last game, Orianna teleports right.
Game.
Yeah, or Orianna teleports back to lane, and immediately TSM make a play on top side, and he uses his teleport up top side instead of back to lane. So I think he definitely deserved his props, but a lot of people are stepping up on that team. Huni has been rightfully getting roasted. He definitely cleaned it up with some of the tank play, and Lost is definitely doing a lot better with the carry. That Ezreal specifically was looking good.
I think it's nice for TSM because it feels like not only did they pick up some wins, it feels like they got a bit more of a direction, right? And Huni even kind of talked about that in his interview, about how they have all these different play styles and they have to kind of bring it together and whatnot. And it does feel like they kind of landed on, all right, well, Huni's kind of playing weak side. Power of Evil is kind of like our late game insurance, and we're going to play towards bot lane. And that's going to be kind of like where they really want to focus. And it felt like when resources were put towards bot lane instead of sort of roaming away, it felt like they did a lot better. They had a lot better moments, I think, both as a 2v2 and bringing down the jungle and having that Pantheon instead of trying to roam towards mid, actually just focusing on getting kills and pressure in their lane. Seemed like it did work a lot better for them. So I think it's really encouraging for TSM. I think that no one really doubted that they had some pretty incredible individual skill, in some of their roles on the team. But it was, could they actually bring it together? And it felt like this weekend they were able to.
I think draft was a big improvement as well this weekend. TL definitely didn't have a great draft. But in also the Immortals game, TSM had the double global comp, which was really, really strong. So like, I expect TSM to be one of these teams where it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back quite a bit over the course of the season, where the naysayers they'll probably be like a really ugly game that they lose, where Huni has one of his int games and Sword Art misses all his abilities again, and Freak does a 5-minute video about it. But like, I don't think it'll be this like constant improvement for them, but I do think it will be generally trending in the right direction. So like,
did you think that their draft was actually really good this weekend though? Like the TL game, the TL game, for example, they double blind pick solo lanes. They were losing both solo lanes by quite a bit, if I recall correctly. and then they had that one play bot with Azir where he got 3-4 kills, and then they kind of like that was like the big moment, right? But
Yeah,
prior
but I
to
mean,
that, they had like given up counter pick in 2 lanes, and it felt like they had losing lanes across the board.
yeah, but to do that, I think TL ended up with a pretty booty hole comp where they're four range basically, and the Nautilus as your only support, and like Nautilus is paper. If once his aftershock wears out, he's not a real front line, and so you have like Zhonya's Kennen as your real front line.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's one of those games where like if you want to get small CS leads when you build a comp like this, like go for it. I'll fall 1k down and I'll have a better 5v5. So like you could say that maybe the double blind pick was risky, and maybe TL could have exploited it better with their draft, but I think when you look at the 5v5, so the comps, they had a better draft. But maybe how they got there, you could criticize a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem like Team Liquid have been investing a lot in counter picks and some harder to execute overall team compositions in order to get favorable lane matchups. I actually really like them pushing that envelope, especially with Alphari on the team, because that's something you kind of want them to be able to utilize for best of play, international play. They have their sights set very high, and so you need to kind of branch out, especially since there's a compact timeline. So
did the branch get chopped off though? Like, are they going to
that branch
keep
snapped? They tried to branch out, it couldn't bear the weight, and it broke.
Yeah, I felt like Alphari kind of came back to earth this weekend. He was doing his Conqueror Kennen, which feels like pretty lane focused. And that didn't really work out. The Quinn game, I was about it when he picked it, but he went even against Someday before Santorin got him a kill. And then he got up in farm, right? Because he's moving around the map faster. Santorin flash slept him and whatever.
Yeah.
But like, he was down a summoner and even CS with his counter pick in the 1v1. Straight up 1v1 with no jungle interference against Someday. And this was like 8 minutes in.
Here's the thing, though. I don't want to now see them revert to all the coaching staff is like, shit, okay, we can't do these counter picks, we can't do split push, we can't do anything, and revert back to turtle shell Team Liquid. So that's why my answer is still gonna stay the same. Azael, I'm still gonna say yes. Yeah. Because I want progress. I don't want to be too scared or knee-jerk reaction.
I just wonder, you're now 3-3. Do they get a little bit nervous, right? And I'm not saying
contender or pretender.
I'm not saying that they're gonna never play carries again, because very clearly they will, right? Like, that is one of Alphari's great strengths. I just wonder if they will go for like such lane focused ones, or if it'll be back to more like the Camille and stuff, right? I think that Quinn and these types of picks have a place in the meta, and that they should be picked. But you have to be able to succeed with them for them to be a threat and pick ban, right? If they came into this game and he trashed his opponent, like he trashed Someday, even if it was just one game, everyone who's then blind picking Renekton against them would have to at least consider banning out Quinn or have a plan around it, right? Which I think is really valuable. So I do hope they do it, to your point. But I just wonder, are they going to be like, all right, we gotta like button it up, play a bit more safe, try to get some wins under our belt, and then we get to experiment again later on.
Yeah, I could see that, just because I think they came in as such heavy favorites after the lock-in tournament, and they haven't looked nearly that dominant. Bot lane has not been getting all the solo kills that they were before. Alphari, like you said already, not the monster CS lead. So I could see a world where it's like, okay, maybe we started the experimentation a little too early, and we still have to work on some more fundamental how we want to play the game as 5-men thing. I could see a world where they do pull it back a little bit. But to Azael's point, like, I don't want to see no carries top or this kind of stuff.
So, and I would say that they aren't. I wouldn't really chalk it up to experimenting as much, because they're using similar stuff that they use successfully in lock-in. I just think they're playing worse now and losing these games. Jensen is playing worse for mid lane on multiple champions, and the bottom lane, as you said, isn't getting their big dominating moments where they're picking up these early kills, and they're using fairly similar stuff, but I think it's just a lower bar of execution. So I still think Team Liquid are contenders, and Quinn is also contender as far as giving the champion. a place in our little game. I will put them both in there, but I think it really is just coming down to some of the individual play so far from the team.
Big agree. I'll give you the big agree on both of those.
All right, nice. What do you think, Azael? Contenders,
Yeah,
all.
they're of course contenders. I mean, the TSM and TL are for sure. For Dignitas, it's obviously about where you draw the line. All right, what about CLG? So there's been a lot of discussion about CLG. They finally picked up their first win. I'm going to set the bar for CLG contender at making playoffs, right? So top 6. And we have to keep in mind, Broxa, I think it's been hinted at now, maybe has his visa. He tweeted something like it might be happening. Tafkins tweeted something like it was like, Super Saiyan like running, but it was like Broxa's face and whatnot. So there's some hints that maybe they're going to have Broxa. People who want to believe are kind of saying, hey, CLG's had some good early games. Sure, they've trolled away some games too, but what if Broxa comes in and now they can start winning those games? Is their early game legit? Can CLG start picking up some of these dubs?
I think that they are What are you gonna say?
I don't know. I was gonna latch onto the last little bit of is the early game legit? Because a lot of the early games got these great boosts of these level 1s, where like Jensen's like poking around in mid lane, like, haha, we're about to start an LCS game. Oh shit, everybody's on my ass, I'm dead. First blood. And then like they do the really intelligent one, which I think they deserve full credit for, the Alistar bait for smoothing the pixel brush. That was really well done.
Yeah.
Especially after the Jensen one that they had done earlier. So I think they just definitely deserve full credit for those. But when those happen multiple times and then you get a week pass as well, every team is looking like, all right, we're playing CLG next. What do we need to look at? Don't get trolled by some of these crazy ass level 1s. Nobody, get baited. So you'll have to continue to innovate if you want to continue to get those specific types of leads.
I mean, even one of their plays didn't work out. I think it was against 100 Thieves in week 1. They had a clever ward to watch a late invade through blue ramp, or not blue ramp, the pixel brush. But then he had a sweeper, and they swept it, and then Closer still almost went in there, and someone pulled Closer's leash back, and we're like, no, dude, do not go where we just swept the ward, because CLG had 3 men waiting in the brush to kill whoever came in that way. So, like, I don't know who's cooking these up, but they all seem pretty well researched. So, it is something that I think teams sometimes go lax on. They're like, we'll just point defense. And, if you're consistently trying to make these plays, they won't work every single time. But, like, even when they're not working, I see them trying to do clever level 1s, which is cool to see.
And it does go a little bit beyond that, too, because they also have had some good lane phases out of Wild Turtle. And yesterday, Finn was crushing it with just one counter gank. He had ended the game with 3-level lead, maxed out on Aatrox. He's teleporting to save the other side of the map when the the dives are going bad. So if I could definitely see pieces coming together. As of right now, though, to put them in playoffs, you have to look at the competition that you are then kind of by default saying are also pretenders, and it's hard to push a lot of these other teams down.
Yeah, I think. I don't think they're as bad as their 1-5 record shows, especially if they get Broxa and he's able to play pretty well. But I do think that they dug themselves a bit of a hole. I know it's still pretty early in the season. You're only 2 games, maybe even 1 game out of playoffs right now. I'd have to look at the standings, but like it still just feels like it's an upward battle, because even when Broxa gets here, I don't think people should be viewing him like a cure-all at all. Like you're gonna have to still work with him to get him in there. Look at what happened with TL when he showed up last year. I expect a similar thing here, where like the issues that are plaguing them are still going to be there. So like, I think maybe it's just a little bit too bad of a start with too much catch up to do. But I think the early game has been legit, and I could see them continuing to have decent early games.
Yeah, I mean, the playoff cutoff is usually about 50-50, right? About having a 500 or so record. And it's an 18-game season, and they're starting 4 games below 500, essentially, if Broxa comes in day 1, right? And, would I predict them to be a team that then from here on out wins 4 more games than they lose? Probably not, right? I think that's a bit tough because there's a lot of teams at the top that you're not going to expect them to win against, and I think it feels more even, more back and forth against a lot of teams at the bottom. I see them probably still more as like a 7th, 8th, so probably going to keep them more in that pretender list. How are you guys feeling about mid lane so far in this split? Because there has been some discussion about like what's the strongest role, what's the weakest role, and it felt like a lot of people were kind of pointing towards mid lane maybe being the weakest role in the LCS right now. Agree, disagree? Like, do you think that some of the loss of Bjergsen is affecting that? Do you think that this is an overreaction and some of the players that we expect to look really good, like Perks and PoE, just hadn't been as hot early on as people were expecting?
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit of all of the above because losing Bjergsen is for sure going to hurt it right off the bat. And then as you're saying, and Perks, and they've even talked about it, he has been struggling, especially with his lane phase early on a bit, and they're kind of attributing that to not playing as much solo queue, ramping up before coming over, and then actually, the time switching back to mid lane definitely takes a bit. He's super grinding now to get up there, but slow start for him, which was supposed to kind of fill the vacuum that Bjergsen left. I think it's funny though, very funny that Jensen, one of the most outspoken mid laners on the topic, has underperformed in the last couple of games there, kind of also contributing to it. But speaking of funny, the whole Jizuke one just last night was just so hilarious. He goes back in with the first one. You're like, okay, he thought he was out of tower range. He was right on the edge of dropping it, but went back in too early to take the last tower shot to get executed. But then the second one, where he just turbo dives in, trying to chase him down and some sort of makeup play there to dying at the mid turret again. And
Those are
Soligo actually
hilarious, by the
gets
way.
the kill on this one. It's super hilarious, especially because it has just been building up. Of Jizuke has been playing so well, and we hadn't had these moments where everyone always kind of puts this asterisk on him. It's like, all right, when is the hilarious like blooper gonna come out? And it did. It finally did.
Those games were so funny. Like that.
That's some killed on screen.
There's the series of plays where he dives mid lane to the turret with Sully got like 1 HP, but then they snipe him with the Ezreal ult right after and stuff, and then he dies running through the tower again. That one was really fun. The first one felt more forgivable, I guess, but
that's what I'm saying, because he was on the edge of tower range.
Yeah.
He thought he dropped it, was going back
in
into finish.
Yeah. The second one though was just like he's still like full health and he's just running through the turret at him.
I think Jizuke has been good, not as good as in lock-in, so I don't know. That was a weird game. There was a lot of things that was weird that game, because even like Dardoch's invade after getting so much help from like Neo roaming, who was like level 1 and roaming mid a second time. Like, that was definitely one of those games where you're like, I don't think these are optimal plays, everybody. So, I don't know. Good for Dignitas for being able to clutch it out, though.
So, what about Demonte? Talking about mid laners and 100 Thieves a bit. How do you guys see Demonte now? Because there has been kind of this discussion about, how good is Demonte? How do we actually rank this guy? Some people want to put him in the bucket of like, okay, you're pretty good at roaming, but like, that's it. Some people want to, say that, no, he's actually like really legit and can play at a higher level. So like, how is he stacking up in a world where there's, PoE and Perks and Jensen? I feel like coming into the season, everyone would just default have those guys above him at the top. Is that still the case, or do you think he's actually performing better?
I actually, even coming into this season, had him pretty high. So I definitely have Demonte in the second. No, he's actually good bucket. Especially because he has already performed on several control mages for them. And he still has done some roaming plays, even with those champions, and doesn't have a huge giant CS lead. Nobody's getting these lane kingdoms, Orianna versus Azir stuff coming in. There haven't been big differences from person to person, and Demonte has done so much for this team, being very flexible. I think it's just good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to look at the CSD, Jizuke is number 1 still. He's actually 11 CSD at 10. Then it goes Jensen. He has an 8.2 CSD at 10. Beyond that, it's like barely advantages. There's Insanity 2.7. Then Saligo is the next highest at even. Everyone else is negative. So
Perks is in last, baby.
Yeah, Perks is actually in last. Yeah, negative 6.8 CSD. So there's a couple people that are having kind of that outstanding lane phase, and you can maybe point somewhat to the picks, like Jizuke a bit did have the Lucian, and you expect some CS advantages there and whatnot. But to your point, like for most players, the gap in farm is very small, and it seems to be more about how you're performing in the rest of the game. And I do think that Damonte is doing a really good job with that, right? And even some of these players that you traditionally expect to be like better in lane haven't necessarily be performing. So, will Damonte be top 3 at the end of the year? Will he be considered there and be an All-Pro? I'm not sure. But if I had to vote today on All-Pro, I think I would have him in my top 3. I think I would have him on one of those teams. And I think that it's cool to see that as like a legitimate NA mid laner who's performing near or at the top. Feels like the last time we really had this and we're having this discussion was like Pobelter, maybe like 2 years back or something, when some people were really talking about Pobelter as perhaps the best performing mid laner at the time. But even then, almost everyone still had Bjergsen and Jensen above him. So feels like it's been a while, and especially for a guy to be coming up and I think change his reputation a bit, because it does feel like prior to last year, no one was really considering Damonte as like a top level player. Last year, he had a pretty strong performance, and he's built on that, right? 100 Thieves look really good. And I think he's been a pretty large part of that. Even when he is playing those control mages, to your point, Kobe, he's still like able to get out on the map and affect things, which I think is really cool to see.
I think some of the criticism towards him goes like too far in one direction. Like, yeah, he's clearly best on the roaming champions, whether that be Galio, TF, even Set, or a Kiana back in the day, like some kind of assassins. But I don't think that means that he's just bad at things that are not that. I think there's clearly things in his wheelhouse, and he's not the strongest control mage player, but I don't think he's like a total liability when he gets put on those or anything like that. Give him Rise. He has the mind to make good plays with it. We've seen them use it to get Baron and stuff like that. Like, there's enough champions that he can almost always probably find one that fits his play style, as well as the fact that even when he is playing a more traditional play style, it's not bad. It's not like he's getting clapped like you're saying. So I think the people who detract from him see the good games, these insane games where he's all over the map, then they see like one of his Oriana games where he's not doing as much, and they go, see, look, he's not that good. It's just the champs that he plays. And I think it's being a bit reductive on that level, because he'll keep finding champs. He'll keep playing well on the different roaming control mages, and I hope he keeps it up and gets the credit he deserves, because it does feel like this playstyle often doesn't get that potentially. Like Niski was hard dominating for parts of the year, and it took a lot of convincing to get him even first All Pro, and it always went to his junglers with the MVP. So closers looking great with this kind of playstyle behind him.
Yeah, I mean, you're enabling the jungler, right? And that it's like, who came first, right? Like, who's the one who deserves it? And I think the same discussion happens when you have a marksman who's doing really well, right? Like, if tactical pops off, it's like, oh, well, is it because Court JJ's coming in with the spoon? He's like, open up, here's a free kill. Coming in, feeding him.
Airplane.
Yeah, exactly. Here's the first blood, buddy. Have a couple scoops of turret plates.
He slaps out of his hand. No, I don't want that. Instant to turret.
Yeah. So it's sometimes tough, right? And I do think that in some of these roles that feel pretty linked, when it is a lot about mid and jungle moving together and playing together, it can be tough to really nail down like, okay, well, who's deserving of this credit, right? Is it the jungler that got the mid laner ahead, or is it the mid laner that then executed with that lead? All right, we got some Apple podcast reviews here. We got a couple of good ones from you guys, so thank you very much for sending these in. If you guys want to leave your Apple reviews, if we get some funny ones, we'll probably read them. This one comes from Spartans Never Die, Cash or Trash. Why are you even looking at the reviews? Obviously, the dive is cash money, baby. Let's go. We got another here from Pro Alcoholic. It says, if it weren't for this podcast, I'd probably be a TSM fan. Well, whew, disaster averted.
Name's making sense now.
Next one here from Moxie Phoenix says, "Thank you guys so much for making great content. Kobe and Azael are amazing. Even if MarkZ is a stiff old curmudgeon." The weekly overview, the in-depth analysis, and the witty banter make the dive an amazing show. Would love to hear more draft breakdown and analysis if possible. Maybe that's a segment we could bring in. Maybe we could pull in a draft to talk about each week or something. That could be pretty cool. But that's a great review there, Moxie.
No, I don't like new ideas. Keep them out.
Get out!
I hate change.
We changed Mark's title. Curmudgeon.
Kind of fits, you know. It's good. It's good.
It's not the least accurate description.
It definitely fits. Yeah, definitely appreciate the reviews, especially the funny ones coming in here. So we'll continue to scan for more of those and pick out some funny ones. Patches coming up though. Actually, this is the biggest news for all the junglers walking around, because 11.4, it has a decent amount of champion changes, but most of it is going to be loaded into the system changes for jungler, and the full printed official patch notes aren't quite out yet, because we're recording this on Monday now, but most of the information is out there. They might tweak a little bit of it. General idea though, we don't have to use the exact numbers, since those are always tweaked a little bit. For golden experience, they're going down. Golden experience down, health of the camps up. So they are harder to do, or just take longer to do, and they give you less rewards. There's an easy decision here for junglers. What does that mean? When the camps take longer and they don't give you as much, I'm going ganking. And people have already started postulating what types of systemic changes that might have for the league, because then you want junglers that can operate on lower gold income, but you also want ones that can do like level 2 ganks and stuff. You know, maybe we see Xin Zhao and Jarvan stuff start to come out, red buff into gank. So you try and get a lot of focus on winning lanes and getting solo laners and really raising them up to carry you. And then later you try and transition into more utility. And then maybe that also has an effect on what types of overall team comps are running, if this is the position that you're filling with champions in the jungle.
Mm-hmm. The things that I was immediately drawn to was the Everfrost and Cosmic Drive changes, because these are two items that basically just don't exist right now. Like, I never see anyone build Everfrost ever. Like, that is just so
more
dead.
Like never frost, am I right?
I saw Zoe pick it up out of a bubble. A boom.
Yeah, I didn't build it though, Kobe. I'm not. You did not counter my point. So they buffed it a fair bit. They reduced the cast time on it. They gave it 50 more health, and they gave the active damage base 25 more damage, and they increased the AP modifier. So they like triple buffed it. So I would be interested to see, if anyone is actually going to go towards it, if it's enough of a change. In the past, when you think about some of the people kind of building the frozen hose or whatever you want to call it, Super Soaker build from before, maybe we can get some of those champions actually, back on this, building it. With that base damage, I'm not sure like how much of a difference that's going to make for your early wave clear and whatnot, but I would like to see that item brought in. I think some of the utility items are pretty cool. And then also the Cosmic Drive change, I think is pretty neat. It was when you use the spell on someone, you got move speed. Now it's going to be, I believe, passive move speed and ability haste. So as long as you have 160 AP, so they just think they don't want you to get it first item or whatever, you get 20 ability haste and 10 to 30 move speed scaling. So that seems like a pretty significant amount. By the end of the game, having 30 additional move speed seems pretty strong. There's got to be some champions, I feel like, that could really enjoy that.
It's really strong, and part of the other thing they're kind of gating with the new must have this amount of ability power is they're getting it from the like AP bruisers, because you have to get this threshold or else you're not getting value. It's just like Warmogs or something. So it does kind of keep it out of the hands of some of those bruisers that would really abuse it. I think this thing is gonna definitely pop its head up in the LCS. The move speed is so good. For a lot of these AP mages to be able to kite out on all the CC that's flying around nowadays.
even like roaming and stuff in like the mid game, just being able to get from mid to side waves and whatnot and pick up farm or make plays. To circle back a little bit onto the jungle discussion, it's a really interesting one for me because like on a competitive level, I don't usually care too much if it's one of these more farm oriented jungler or a little bit more gank centric tank style because I think both have their merits for watching. Both I think have interesting strategies that can go on with them. So I will enjoy watching both, but it always feels weird on the solo queue level because it feels like the things that people complain about with junglers gets exacerbated when they actually nerf them this way. People are like, oh god, I hate junglers. They're taking over my game and they're so strong. And then you get this kind of nerf, and then they're like, well, I can't farm, so I'm in your lane level 2. And they're like, god, I hate junglers. They're in my lane all the time. And it's like this weird feedback loop where I'm not exactly sure how to address it for the solo queue players to make them feel good. But
it's a trade-off, right? It's do you want to like because they'll be in your lane maybe more, but I think more people's complaint before is that it's like, well, this person's actually just I've been laning the whole time, I'm doing fine, and the jungler showed up and they're higher level than me and they 1v1 me, right? And that's the
so if the jungler is farming the whole time, you are doing something wrong if they're higher level than you.
Okay, so maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration, but there are games where definitely, I mean, even in competitive, where people are power farming and are higher levels than the solo laners, right? If they, for example, pick up mid lane farm. If I'm playing top lane and their mid laner is doing bad and they scoop up all that farm and they're power farming, or maybe they've counter jungled or whatever, it can happen. Either way, I think that's part of people's complaint is that it's like junglers can get to such a strong level so safely, right? Without having to like lane against someone, they're kind of just getting free farm the whole time. So I think that is the trade-off, and it just depends what you like facing. Because I agree with you, it can be sometimes just more annoying just have the jungler there, whether they're stronger or not, right? I'd almost rather them just be farming.
Yeah, it's like, well, if you played well and you caught a bunch of extra farm from laners and stuff, and you pulled a gank or two off, like why shouldn't you be higher level than me, just last hitting and maybe doing a little bit of trading with this guy. Like I don't think that took any less work. Maybe that's just my jungle bias coming in, where I'm like, like if I played well, why can I not be the highest level in the game? And sometimes these changes feel that way a little bit as a jungler.
And the reason kind of is, so if you're just power farming your own jungle, right? And you haven't gotten an injection from, getting a bunch of kills or getting lane farm or something like that, if you are on one of the power clearing junglers, you can be this same power level as a solo laner, and that is more power inherently because jungle can be anywhere, gets to roam around and do more ganks. And so this role has so many options and so much mobility to it that they kind of feel like, or it seems that they have always felt like, every time we kind of poke our heads up above that level, you get smacked back down. It needs to be at a lower level to be able to have the trade-off of having the mobility and information gain and all that. And so I don't, even though it is, nerfing my main role, I'm not too perturbed by, taking it down a bit. I've survived in plenty of jungle metas where you kind of scrape by, you play utility, you play frontline. I like playing Sejuani. I don't care. I'll set up for my teammates as long as they carry me. And it's just going to be about the degree of these changes. And that's kind of why I want to be able to dive into the exact experience and gold numbers. And we kind of have to wait until the official patches is released and they do the final tweaks on it. But I don't see it being a doomsday scenario for jungles where we go back to some of the Dark Age days where we're actually useless. I think
Runic Bulwark, get in there.
It's gonna be just fine, and honestly, you'll get some more experimentation with some different champions. We've had our fill of the power clears.
The one thing I will say is, like, while you limit yourself a bit, it also opens up options for like what Dardoch is doing. I think sometimes it can't really happen with a lot of those champions if the jungle income is too low, right? So that is kind of my sad part about it. Like, I'd rather just see if it's like, oh, Olaf and Udyr are a problem, so like let's nerf jungle experience because they're just power farming the whole game, right? I'd rather see individual champions nerfed than jungle nerfed, because I think it's cool when there is enough gold income that you can support more different styles, right? And I do feel like you're cutting off the tanks a bit maybe, but I like being able to play, some of the carry junglers and have that be pretty effective. Like playing Kindred feels good when there's a lot of gold in the jungle. Playing Karthus, playing, a lot of these style champions can feel pretty nice. But I do get that some of the champions that want to be out in the lanes and aggressive, and maybe that's something that has been keeping Elise out of competitive, for example. It's like Elise wants to spend her time ganking, but if you spend your time ganking and that first gank doesn't work and Olaf's up 2 levels, well, have fun the rest of the game.
Yeah, and competitive teams have been always a lot better at working around tracking the enemy jungler and avoiding, some of the more solo queue pop off jungler moments for sure. I don't think, by the way, I don't see any as of right now Udyr nerfs on this. So regardless of jungle power going down, this man is a tank. This man has operated on low resources before. Udyr is still going to retain, the placement in the rankings right now. So until the champion gets an individual nerf, I think it'll still be relative power above the other junglers. Even if the jungle overall is less resources, you can still just run at people, be engaged for your team, and you're still focusing objectives.
Mm-hmm. Some of the other champions that got some pretty notable nerfs, Camille, Kai'Sa, Renekton, Samira, champions that are all fairly popular in competitive play, all did receive some nerfs. I know a lot of people were talking about the Samira one because Samira can no longer dash to allies, plus the dash is slower. So that seems like a pretty big change. I do think that, especially at high levels of play, you see people use that dash on allies pretty consistently, honestly, to position themselves sometimes for the ult, to actually be able to go in for an aggressive trade, get a kill, and then reset with do 3E, dash out to safety. So I feel like with Samira getting less play already, this just pretty much deletes Samira from competitive play. I don't expect to see it anymore. I do think that at the highest levels of play, that nerf matters the most, and we're already not really seeing that much. So I do think that there's going to be a bit of a shift among some of these champions, and it'll be interesting to see, what is rising up as a result, because I felt like Tristana is actually pretty strong right now. I'd be interested to see if that means Triss is going to move up at all, with, the Kai'Sa nerfs coming through, with Samira nerfs coming through. Could be interesting.
On the Samira thing, if, and I'm assuming that this is true, if this means that you can't use it on your allied minions either, then it's super dead. Like, she uses that all the time in lane, back to her own minions. So, and she got her damage hit as well. So, goodbye.
I was gonna say maybe if her numbers get buffed in some other way, that she's just like this all-in volatile champion that you pair with a Leona and you try and get become a kill lane, but with damage nerfs too, it's like oi.
Damage nerfs, the R cooldown went up from 3 seconds to 8 seconds. Probably won't matter mostly, but when you're getting damage nerfs plus the E is slower, and the W duration is also lower as well. Like, everything got nerfed.
Get in that dumpster. That's what they said.
That's what it feels like, to be honest. It's one of those champions that I think, and maybe they're doing this to set up for other buffs, because it's one of those champions that I think people just hate. Whether or not it's super strong, people just hate the champion because you remember those games where Samira gets ahead and then just spins through your whole team, one-shotting everyone and healing through all your damage, and it's the most annoying thing, right? And people don't like those champions, and it feels like that is the response, is just kind of kill it, and maybe they'll try to figure out like a less frustrating way to buff it later on or something.
Fair enough. All right, it's time for our Honda MVP.
Kobe's like, I'm not a marksman. I don't care. Fair enough.
Exactly. Honestly, I was never really frustrated by Samira because I play most champions with CC. And the nurse said, "Come in." My bottom lane cries sometimes when they get all in. You
don't cry when Samira gets a pentakill is just with one button.
I just give her a slap. She's dead.
Okay, you're just
I've been able to take care of my own business with the Samiras in my
Fair enough.
When they remove Udyr's bear stun, Mark and I'll be like, well, fair enough.
I don't really know what you're talking about, but fair enough.
I want to see I want to see if that was actually the change. Like, what would they replace it with? Like, he has gloves now for his bear stance or something.
It's a
and
slight slow.
They like take off all the claws, and he's just like petting people or something. Yeah,
You get a
like,
20% decaying slow now instead of the stun. Fair enough.
fair enough. I won't play that champ anymore. Fair enough. See you, Udyr.
No loyalty. Oh.
Nope. I'm all about LP gains. I will drop you quick if you get nerfed like that. Back to the Honda MVP though section. Any new front runners for y'all? Do you get bonus points for doing A to Z challenges?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. There you go.
do get bonus points. Yeah, of course. It's in the rules. It's it's in the fine print under there. So he's doing pretty well. New candidates. How much do I value a champion pool and MVP? So on the real, I don't care at all, unless I think it is giving your team an advantage, right? If you play 18 games of Udyr and you just slam every game and for some reason no one ever bans it, great. You're the MVP. Cool. If you play 18 games of Azir, I don't think it matters.
No style points?
Well, no, you get style points, but I'm saying it's only in the context of how the picks work, right? If the picks are getting you an advantage, I'll give you bonus points. If like just having a champion pool, I like, as far as my voting for MVP, I don't care. I think that it has to result in performance increases. If someone is coming out and getting, counter picks and being able to run over games as a result of their expanded champion pool, or, baiting out dive comps and then bringing in the Swain or these types of things, then you start getting bonus points for me because you're adding additional value to your team. But if you're just picking different stuff to pick it, I don't care for MVP, even though I love to watch it.
I think I pretty much agree with what you're saying because like look at that Kayn game by Dardoch, right? Like that's a great Kayn game, and so he deserves credit for popping off and having a pretty good game. But it's not like that pop off is any more valuable than another pop off that someone did on a standard champion. Because hold on, let me finish. Because no one's like really like if you can exploit people's drafts, great, but you need to that needs to have like a causal effect on like drafts and stuff like that. So for example, like Bjergsen last split would blind pick his mid all the time while also being able to build unique team comps with it, like his zillions and stuff like that. And for me, that was one of the things that was one of the reasons I think I voted for him for MVP was he had the lowest counter pick rate of mid laners in the world by a pretty substantial margin, and he's just taking unique champions while doing it and having a big champion pool. So like that to me is a time where I'm like, that champion pool helped a lot. If you're just picking weird stuff that functions in a team comp, great, it's cool, but it's not actually generating more wins potentially.
Yeah, well, guess what? It is resulting in champ select wins here for Dignitas. Junglers, there were several junglers banned against Dardoch. He got 3 jungle bans against him, and if this person is winning every single game on one champion, there's no way everybody doesn't look at that and say, yeah, well, it's just him on Udyr or him on X thing, and then that does get whittled down and targeted. For sure, there is value in
we didn't say there's no value. It's
like
how
this.
much value, right? It's where are you placing it? Because to your point, yes, of course, I'm being hyperbolic with 18 games of Udyr or Orianna, but there are lots of examples where mid laners play like 80% of their games on like Azir Corki or Azir Corki Orianna, and they have like that triumvirate that never gets banned, and they pick one of those, and that's what they do every time. And if you're dominating every game with that, I don't care. I think that's just that's incredibly valuable, right? So to me, it's less about the pick and more about what you do with the pick and why you're picking it, right? Like the Kayn game, I think that made sense and that was great. And I'm giving Dardoch extra points for that right now. If I was considering for MVP and I was voting for it,
there we go.
But then you also have to subtract points for
the
Rengar, for the Rengar, but which to me didn't really make any sense at all in that game. And even
it was
the Mundo
actively bad.
Was
he had
Mundo,
no lanes to gank with it. It couldn't do anything.
Was the Mundo better than some of the other picks in that situation? So it's like if you're going to add points, you also got to subtract when it doesn't make sense. The Rengar one to me was the one that made the least sense by far. It just felt like there was nowhere to go. There's Tom Kench with exhaust. There's nothing to gank.
Set mid or whatever it was. I think
set mid. Yeah. And there was a flex pick to be fair, but still.
Yeah, that one definitely you can subtract points for, but the mere fact of displaying super large champion pool successfully in games gets you extra points, gives you some value here. That's all we're looking for. Regardless, I don't think anybody's got Dardoch on there like that close to the MVP vote.
Closer than he would have been.
But there we go. Is he closer than closer though? Jungle v jungle matchup here.
No, I don't think so. Not yet.
Zach. All right. Fair enough.
Have you guys actually seen that TikTok and stuff, like the Cody Co, like fair enough?
No, I didn't know that it is a TikTok.
You guys have no idea what we're even referencing. Oh my god!
I just said fair enough as a normal term.
Yeah, I just thought the way he said that was funny, so I started saying it.
Yeah, we ripped it off. The reason we think it's funny is because it's yeah, it's funny because it's from something.
Okay, well, it was actually funny because of other reasons too, because Kobe and I had never heard of it. And we still found it funny. What? So
I'll start stealing comedian jokes, and you guys will think I'm the funniest guy ever.
If it's from TikTok, probably yes, because I
was gonna say,
at all.
Let me open up a TikTok here real quick. Figure out what Mark's talking about.
These boomers, get me out.
How do I get here on the TikTok? I'm trying to find some jokes. All right, we got some anchor questions here. First one coming from Keenan. Let's hear it, Keenan.
We saw someday Biofrost and definitely carry weaker teammates in Academy. How much should the perception of a player's skill be impacted by the skill of their teammates? Do the poor optics mean that some pros, namely Jizuke and to a lesser extent Sneaky, would want to avoid Academy despite the potential to carry? Thanks for answering my question.
I think you always have to take into consideration the different things that are setting a player up when you're looking at the optics of, who is actually delivering value here. And you guys kind of touched on it earlier in the show when you're talking about, is the jungle setting up the mid, or is the support setting up the AD carry, those types of things. And again, we've had a lot of questions revolving around, judging players and kind of analyst questions and scouting questions. And I think that, that this one falls right in with those as one of those skills you really have to train.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those loaded questions too, because there's a couple things in here. Like we're asking about Academy, but then also how much should the perception of a player's skill be impacted by the skill of their teammates, which is a very broad question, because in LCS all the time, like a player like Sven Skaren, depending on how well the team was playing, has looked either like trash or an MVP. Despite the fact that I don't think his personal level changed all that much, just because, like the TSM 2016 spring versus 2016 summer, I think it was largely a lot of the same stuff he wanted to do in the game, but like the team was just playing way better as a unit. And like, I think those are tough questions to answer, especially when you start putting it with the extra layer of context of Academy and like, well, you're the best player in the league now, someday you better stomp. And he did. Great. But like if Sneaky went down or someone else, and when Sneaky did go down, I remember he didn't look particularly impressive, but then he came back in the LCS and did great. And I think like there's so many things going on with each individual case. It's a little hard to just like paint a brush over like a question like this.
I would say that Jizuke for sure wants to avoid Academy regardless, because he's already in the LCS. He's like, I don't want. Yeah, I'll avoid Academy. For players that are not in LCS like Sneaky or something, I think it is pretty interesting decision, right? If you have that option, would you actually say no? I'm not going to Academy. I will only make the jump right back into LCS because I don't want to be dragged down.
I think it's, as far as like, should it affect your perception of player skill? I think that's an obvious yes. And I think to put it into perspective for players, just think about the variance in your games when you're playing with like a really good jungler if you're a solo laner versus a jungler that you think isn't playing around what you want them to do. Like the difference in just innate synergy from game to game, how games can feel completely different when you're playing with a support that is on the same page as you, that is going in when you want to go in, or is playing defensive when you want to play defensive. Like these are the things that can completely change how a game can be played, and the same is true in pro. I like the Sven Skaren point, because I think that while Sven Skaren, looked good and then looked bad, based on how the team is playing around him, I would also say that he never really felt like changed his play style to try to adapt to what else was happening. Like he always kind of maintained that aggressive positioning and aggressive plays and going for invades and stuff. And then when TSM wasn't doing that, he looked awful, right? But he should also take a little bit of the flack, I think, for not changing how he is playing based on how your teammates are playing, because there is skill in that too. And there are some players that can just plug and play everywhere, and they will mold themselves to their surroundings, right? Where it's like, okay, you're playing support and your AD is playing Jinx and playing really defensive. Well, he probably shouldn't be diving in, right? You're just going to die. So I do think there is an element of that. But I think another great example is actually Licorice. I think Licorice has been considered by most people, like over the last 2 years, if you take the last 2 years as an aggregate, most people will put him as #1 top laner in the league. A lot of people are kind of getting into revisionist history now and being like, well, someday it was always better. And it's like, well, most people actually thought Licorice was better for the last 2 years, if you're not counting this year. And I think that is a great example of how people's perception has changed very quickly of Licorice. And not to say that he's played perfectly this year by any means, but immediately people are almost like rewriting history on how good he was before. And I think a game that kind of stood out to me with like Licorice this split was actually his Gangplank game this weekend against Someday, where he actually got to a really strong lead. You know, he was in his powerful position, but his team was not doing well, and they have no vision on the map. So he basically couldn't extend his lead whatsoever because he had no wards to actually push up and threaten Someday and take towers and do the kind of things that you would expect him to do. And that's something that if you're just kind of watching the game casually, you may not actually notice. You're like, well, he has a bunch of kills and he did nothing with it, so this guy sucks. But at the pro level, if you don't have your team actually pushing forward and getting vision for you and being able to survive on the other side with 4-man squad, you can't really do that much without just like haphazardly running down. You're just going to end up dying over and over. So I think it's a pretty cool question, and it's definitely something that like scouts and coaches and everything have to deal with every single year when they're building their rosters, because you've got to be able to make those decisions. And sometimes people are right and they pull up a player who people think is pretty bad and they're amazing, surrounded by good players. And sometimes there's players that have great reputations that don't turn out as well, that it turns out, hey, maybe they were kind of propped up by their teammates.
All right, continue to send us in more Anchor questions. That's the only Anchor one we have, but we have Twitter questions as well to follow it up. Benjamin Gribbin asks, what is better for the overall growth of the LCS? Rookie/development teams going for aggressive high variance plays, or playing it safe and minimizing mistakes? I always say, if you don't, okay, never mind. I don't always say that. I'm going to go with the aggressive high variance plays because you aren't going to get better or learn more by not trying stuff. If you're trying to minimize mistakes, then you're basically saying, I'm cutting myself off from some of these experiences. It is obviously somewhere in the middle, some gray area here, because you don't want to go to the extremes on either side. You don't want to turn your stage games into full-on scrims, limit testing at every turn. But if you do too much risk avoidance, then we've already seen, we have so much data, especially for North America, teams that default back into trying to limit mistakes do not ever reach that peak. And we are looking at breaking through the ceiling. We are looking at trying to constantly improve, do better than we ever have done before. So we need, you need to, have new experiences and try those plays, or else you're never going to know.
I really like that point, especially within the context of the LCS, which is given in the question, what is better for the overall growth of the LCS in particular? Because I don't think, that answer is quite the same for like LPL, young players coming up potentially, or even LCK. For them, it might be like, okay, learn how to play in a team environment instead of just solo queue trying to like 1v9 the game, which is what you try and do when you're trying to climb elo, right? So like, I think, each region has its own little quirks in it. And so for LCS, it's like, yeah, we need players to be more aggressive. We need, carry tops to actually try carrying, like good for Niles for really trying his best every game to get advantages, even though it's not really working out right now, but like that's the mindset that will help him grow more. Versus like some players probably need to learn, hey, when you're split map, please don't push, or like, maybe leave your turret if you really feel that threatened, everyone's going to have
there are important lessons of risk management, and that's, something that you don't want to lose. Anytime you have two possible extremes that you can go to.
You don't want people like, drafting losing lanes and then just all inning and just sprinting it down on stage, right? Like,
now I know.
Turns out that Twitch Janna doesn't win the all-in level 1 against Set and Draven. Who'd have known? Thought I had it for sure.
Now we know.
Knock that one off the thousands of lists of interactions to test.
And I mean, I think that there's a balance to be struck between what you do in scrim and on stage, right? Traditionally, scrims are more for the limit testing, and hopefully that you have established all this stuff and have a greater understanding of what you can and cannot do, so that when you go on stage, it's not about playing risk averse. It's about taking the risks when it's going to pay off, or taking the risks when it is weighed in your favor, right? So definitely agree, though. In any time teams get too risk averse, especially in international play, we've seen that so many times from top NA teams. It never works out. Great question. We got another one here as well. This one comes from Coob444441. All right. With the continued priority on mobility mythics like Gale Force, should pros be placing a higher priority on grounding champions like Poppy or Cass?
Very minimally. I don't think you force one of those in there. I think Poppy actually is a good example of one that is ready to come in. I think Poppy right now is super strong. She's in a good state for solo queue, and a good state to be able to move in for competitive if you need a tank in that situation. And just kind of passively, by the addition of extra move blocks in the game, their value has gone up. I don't think the value for Cass has gone up enough, but it does go up some.
Yeah, I think Poppy in particular, just her W works a lot easier than Cassio W, and you can usually use it quite well in lane and then in team fights, whereas Cassio W, you're backline mage, so you're not often using it on a lot of these Gale Force targets, unless you're already brush camping, you hit the ult and then you throw the W underneath or something, but that's a really specific situation anyways. So Poppy, yes, because hey, Camille's strong. Poppy usually does well into it. I think there were some situations that Alorum on AD was ooh, I would have liked Poppy here. But that's less about the itemization and more about matchups.
Yeah. I think you just have to look at it like a nice little benefit more than a full reason to pick it, right? These types of interactions, it's oh, hey, if you have a pretty good matchup, mid lane for Cassio, and you need an AP mid laner, and also then you have this nice little benefit, then that's pretty cool. But I don't think you change your draft around just to be well, maybe I'm going to deny Gale Force a minute 30 cooldown that is likely not going to be able to be stopped. But if the matchups are good, I definitely think there's some tanks that are being overlooked in top lane for sure. I think Malphite should be in there more. I think Poppy should be in there more. I even think that Sion and Orin still have a place. People have kind of really foregone the tanks, because I would like to see more tanks at times and more enchanters in the bot lane. I think that can really be strong in some drafts. We'll see if teams do continue to experiment with that, though. Thank you for the questions, everyone. Continue to send in those questions. We'll keep checking in on the Twitter questions, #TheDiveLOL. Send us the Anchor.fm questions as well. We'd love to get those. And we'll keep checking back for funny reviews. If you want to leave us a review on the Apple Podcasts, it helps us out, and maybe you'll hear your review read on the show. That'll wrap us up for now. Thank you again, Honda, for making this episode possible. We love you. And remember, you can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor.fm, and sub to the new YouTube channel, youtube.com/LCS. It's going to be every Tuesday at 5 a.m. The dive will go live on that channel, so you will be able to get those notifications promptly when it comes out. You can also send us your questions. Already said that. Catch us again next week. We'll see you then.